The rogues carved a declaration of war into her skin, 4 claw marks forming the broken crown symbol, a message written in her blood meant for the Alpha King who'd been secretly watching her for 3 years. She was just a laundry Omega, invisible to everyone, until the night she carried his scent deep enough that his enemies used her body as a letter. Now he's kneeling beside her broken form in his private chambers, lifting the bandage with shaking hands. And when he sees what they did, when he realizes they knew she was his mate before even she did, his voice drops to something that isn't quite human. Who did this to you? Welcome back, my amazing viewers. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. All right, settle in, take a breath, and let's get back to it. Sera's wolf had stopped speaking to her the day she chose food for her brother over food for herself. That was 3 years, 2 months, and 4 days ago. Her wolf never forgave her. Not dead, wolves couldn't die while their human lived, but dormant, hibernating. The pack physician had examined her during her mandatory 6-month health screening, frowned at her blood work, and said her wolf would resurface when her body no longer perceived itself to be dying. Those were his exact words. Perceived itself to be dying. As if her exhaustion was a perception, as if the hollowness in her bones was negotiable, as if she had a choice. She didn't. Sera was a laundry Omega in the royal pack compound, the absolute bottom of the hierarchy in the most powerful werewolf territory in the Northern Hemisphere. Not a servant, not staff, a laborer. The distinction mattered. Servants had contracts, protections, days off. Laborers had debts, and Sera's debt owned her entirely. She spent 16-hour shifts in the basement washing rooms where the air was so thick with steam and lye that she sometimes forgot what it felt like to take a full breath. Her hands, cracked, chemical-burned, perpetually raw, washed the Alpha King's silk sheets, scrubbed wolf's blood from the warrior's training leathers, bleached the scent marks from diplomatic guest linens because visiting alphas couldn't smell each other's territories on the fabric. The work was invisible, endless, brutal. She earned 287 silver marks per month. The Sanctuary Pack charged 200 marks monthly to care for her brother Luca, whose wolf had never emerged at all. He was 13, fragile-boned, needed medications that cost more than Sera could calculate. The remaining 87 marks covered her shared bunk in the laborer's dormitory, her meal rations, 1 full meal per day, 2 if she worked overtime, and the soap she wasn't allowed to take from the royal supply. There was no savings, no emergency fund, no margin for error. If she got sick, Luca didn't eat. If she missed a shift, his medications stopped. The other Omegas in the compound had mates who could cover for them, families who sent money during hard months, pack bonds that meant something when crisis hit. Sera had no one. She'd been transferred to the Royal Pack 3 years ago as a debt labor placement, the polite term for being sold. Her father had borrowed money from a beta loan shark to cover what he'd lost in illegal fighting rings. When he couldn't pay, the loan shark sold the debt to a labor contractor. The contractor sold it to the Royal Pack's administrative office. The math was simple. 10,000 silver marks of debt, divided by her monthly labor value, after room and board deductions, equaled 5 years of service. She had 19 months left, 19 months of invisibility, of keeping her head down, her voice quiet, her presence so unremarkable that no one would remember her name or face. In the Royal Pack compound, attention was dangerous. Omegas who got noticed got used, by warriors looking for easy comfort, by betas who liked having someone beneath them to humiliate, by visiting dignitaries who thought laborer Omega meant included in the hospitality. Being invisible kept her safe. Being invisible meant she'd survive long enough to free herself and Luca. So Sera perfected the art of not existing. She walked the corridors with her eyes down, never met anyone's gaze, timed her movements to avoid high-traffic areas, learned which stairwells the ranked wolves never used, kept her scent suppressed, easy enough when her wolf was dormant, and wore the same 3 gray shifts rotated through the week because laborers weren't issued uniforms, just color requirements: gray for laundry omegas, brown for kitchen staff, black for cleaners. It was a system designed to make them interchangeable. And it worked. In 3 years, Sera had spoken directly to a ranked wolf exactly 4 times. Twice to the head housekeeper, once to a beta who'd accused her of stealing, she hadn't, and once to... She shut that memory down. It didn't matter. The only wolves who mattered were the ones who signed her monthly stipend certificates. Everyone else was just an obstacle to avoid or a shadow to melt into. Even the Alpha King, especially the Alpha King, was just a dangerous presence she'd trained herself not to look at. She'd seen him, of course. Everyone had. Alpha King Valerian Thorn was impossible to miss. 6'5" of controlled violence wrapped in bronze skin and cold authority. Black hair he kept military short, eyes the color of winter storms, gray that could freeze or strike depending on his mood, shoulders that seemed too broad for doorways, hands that had reportedly killed a rival alpha in single combat before he'd turned 23. He was 30 now. He'd ruled the Northern Packs for 7 years with a reputation for ruthless efficiency and zero tolerance for weakness. Visiting alphas called him the Winter King behind his back, never to his face, because his dominance felt like frostbite, like something that would kill you quietly if you stayed too close too long. Sera had learned his schedule by necessity. He walked the compound at dawn. She made sure to finish her early shifts before then. He took meetings in the East Wing. She avoided that entire section between 9 and noon. He trained with his warriors in the evening. She never, ever went near the training grounds. Twice she'd been caught in corridors when he passed. The first time, she'd flattened herself against the wall, eyes down, barely breathing while his dominance rolled through the hallway like thunder. He'd walked past without acknowledging her existence. The second time... No, she wasn't thinking about the second time. The point was, Sera had survived 3 years by being no one, by needing nothing, by expecting nothing, by making herself so invisible that even an Alpha King's attention slid past her like water off stone. And that invisibility had kept her safe, right up until the night someone decided she was worth noticing after all. The order came during the midnight shift. Sera had been elbow-deep in a tub of blood-stained linens. One of the warriors had been injured during training, apparently, and the head housekeeper wanted the sheets salvaged, not replaced, when Mira, the dormitory runner, appeared in the doorway. "You, Thorn." Sera looked up, surprised. Runners didn't usually bother learning laborers' names. "Head housekeeper needs someone to run to the village. Urgent fabric order for the summit." Mira's expression was sour. "Weaver's only working tonight. Someone has to retrieve it before dawn." Sera's stomach dropped. "The village? It's past midnight." "Not my problem. You volunteering or do I wake someone else?" The correct answer was, wake someone else. The smart answer. The safe answer. But Mira had already turned to leave, and Sera knew how this worked. If she didn't volunteer, whoever got woken would remember, would find small ways to make her life harder, would report her as uncooperative to the head housekeeper. She couldn't afford uncooperative. "I'll go," Sera said quietly. Mira tossed her a small purse. "Coins for the silk. Weaver's expecting you. Don't get lost." Then she was gone. Sera stared at the purse in her raw hands, already knowing she'd made a mistake. The village was 2 miles away, and the only fast route was through the forest. The forest path looked different at night. Sera had walked it twice before, both times in daylight, both times in groups. The main road that curved around the forest took 40 minutes. The shortcut through it took 15. She had 2 hours until dawn. It should have been enough time, would have been if the weaver hadn't made her wait. "Summit silk takes precision," the old woman had muttered, squinting at her loom by candlelight. "Can't rush perfection. Alpha King Valerian doesn't accept flawed goods." So Sera had waited. perched on an uncomfortable stool in the weaver's shop, watching the sky through the window turn from black to the threatening gray that came before sunrise, watching her safe window of time shrink and shrink until the weaver finally handed her a wrapped bundle of midnight blue silk that cost more than Sera would earn in a year. "Careful with it," the weaver warned. "That's for the Eastern Alphas. Treaty negotiations. If it's damaged, the head housekeeper will have your hide." Sera had nodded, clutched the silk, walked out into the pre-dawn darkness, and now she stood at the forest's edge, staring into the wall of pine trees, knowing she was out of time. The main road meant she'd return after sunrise, after the head housekeeper's inspection, after the morning shift assignments. Late meant reported. Reported meant docked pay. Docked pay meant Luca's medication fund fell short. Sera stepped into the forest. The temperature dropped immediately. The village had been cool, autumn settling into the northern territories, but the forest was cold in a way that felt deliberate, hungry. The pine trees grew so thick here that the pre-dawn light barely penetrated, leaving everything in shades of gray and shadow. Fog clung to the ground like something living. Sera walked fast, eyes forward, arms wrapped around the silk bundle. She knew this path, had memorized it during those 2 daylight trips, and told herself that knowing was enough, that nothing would happen, that she was too insignificant to be worth noticing even here. Her boots crunched on fallen pine needles. Her breath misted in the air. Somewhere distant, an owl called, low and mournful. Otherwise, silence. The wrong kind of silence. Sera's pace quickened. She was halfway through. Maybe 10 more minutes. The path would open near the southern compound gate, and she'd be safe, and this stupid risk would be over. The scent hit her first. Unwashed fur. Old blood. Something rancid underneath, like meat gone bad. Rogue. Sera's dormant wolf stirred, barely, weakly, with an instinct that transcended consciousness. Danger, danger, danger. Run. She ran. The silk bundle slipped. She caught it, kept running. Her lungs burned, the path blurred. Behind her, footsteps. No, not footsteps. Pause. Multiple sets. Fast, too fast. She wasn't going to make it. They hit her from the side. Sera went down hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. The silk exploded from her arms, midnight blue fabric scattering across the forest floor like spilled water. She tried to scream. A hand clamped over her mouth. No, not a hand. Claws. "Quiet, little Omega." The voice was gravel and wrought. "We're not here to kill you." 4 of them. Rogues. Half-shifted. The worst state, where wolf and human fought for dominance and left something unstable in between. Eyes that flickered between human and animal. Muscles that bulged wrong under skin covered in patchy fur. Teeth too long for their mouths. The largest one crouched over her, his claws still covering her mouth. He leaned close, too close, and inhaled deeply at her throat, then went completely, terrifyingly still. "Brothers," he said softly. "Smell her." The others moved in. Sera tried to thrash. Couldn't. The weight on her chest was crushing. One of them grabbed her wrist, pressed his nose to the inside of her arm. Another sniffed her hair. "Winter storms," one muttered. "Old violence," said another. "His scent," the largest rogue confirmed. He removed his claws from her mouth. "You live in the Thorn compound." It wasn't a question. "Please," Sera gasped. "I'm nobody. I don't have anything." "You have his scent buried in your skin." The rogue's voice was almost curious. "How long have you been washing the Thief King's sheets, little Omega? How long have you been touching his things? Breathing his air?" Sera's mind reeled. She did laundry. Just laundry. Everyone in the compound carried traces of pack scent. "I'm a laborer," she choked out. "I'm not pack. I'm just..." Just close enough. The rogue smiled. His teeth were brown. Just visible enough. Do you know what your king stole from us, little Omega? I don't know anything. Our territory, our bloodline rights, our alpha's life. The rogue traced one claw down her cheek, not cutting, just promising. 30 years ago, Valerian Thorn's father slaughtered the Broken Crown Pack and took our lands, called us rogues, exiled the survivors. We've been waiting for the right moment to send a message. His claw pressed harder. And then you walked into our forest, he whispered, wearing his scent like a brand. No, we can't touch him. He's too protected, too powerful. But you? The rogue leaned back, gestured to the others. You're perfect. A message written in flesh. Something he'll have to see, have to acknowledge. Sera tried to crawl backward. Claws sank into her shoulders and slammed her back down. The pain was immediate, blinding. Hold her, the largest rogue commanded. They did, and then they began. The first cut was across her shoulder blades, 4 parallel lines that burned like liquid fire. Sera screamed. The sound echoed through the trees and died in the fog. No one would hear. No one was close enough. The broken crown, the rogue narrated as he carved. So your king remembers what he destroyed. Another slash across her ribs. Sera's vision whited out. Her dormant wolf was shrieking now, awake from sheer terror, trying desperately to surface, to shift, to defend. But there was nothing. No strength, no transformation. Just a weak, starving consciousness that could only feel the pain. They carved her stomach, her thighs, the inside of her left arm, each cut deliberate, precise. A symbol she didn't understand written in her own blood. Stop, Sera sobbed. Please. Does he know your name? The rogue asked, almost conversational. He grabbed her face, forced her to look at him. Does the great Alpha King Valerian know the name of the Omega who washes his sheets? Sera couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. Probably not, the rogue decided. You're invisible, aren't you? Just another laborer, just another body in his compound. He released her face, stood. But you won't be invisible after this. You'll be the message that starts a war. He crouched again, one last time, and carved something into her collarbone, deeper than the others. Sera felt the edge of the claw scrape bone. When he finished, he sat back to admire his work. Beautiful, he murmured. Tell your king, if you survive long enough to tell him anything, that the broken crown remembers. Tell him we're coming for what he stole. Tell him the dead don't forget. The other rogues released her. Sera collapsed onto the pine needles, shaking, bleeding, barely conscious. The silk lay scattered around her like expensive snow, ruined now, soaked in her blood. She'd failed the task, failed to stay invisible, failed to protect herself, failed Luca. The rogues melted back into the trees as silently as they'd come, and Sera lay alone in the dark forest, choking on blood and pine needles, knowing that no one would come looking. Laborers who disappeared on night errands were just written off as runaways. She was going to die here, invisible to the end. Her wolf whimpered once, weak, terrified, useless, and went silent again. And the last thing Sera thought before the darkness took her was that she'd never even said goodbye to Luca. She didn't hear the howl that split the dawn. She didn't hear the hunting party crash through the trees. She didn't hear the patrol leader's sharp intake of breath when he found her, or his shouted command, "Get the king, now!" She didn't hear anything at all. The patrol found her 17 minutes after dawn. Lieutenant Cade Brennan had been tracking rogue scent for 3 days, faint traces along the border that suggested scouts. Not an incursion, nothing urgent. Routine patrol work that should have ended with a standard report and no bloodshed. Then his wolf caught a new scent on the wind. Blood. Fresh. Pack. Blood. "Northeast," he snapped to his unit. "Double time." They shifted mid-run, 4 warriors flowing from human to wolf in the space of a heartbeat, and covered the distance in minutes. The scent led them off the main patrol route into the forest shortcut that connected to the village. The shortcut laborers weren't supposed to use after dark. Cade shifted back to human as he broke through the tree line into the small clearing. His second, Reese, was a breath behind him. "Gods," Reese breathed. She was crumpled on the ground like something discarded. Gray shift, torn and soaked through with blood. Dark hair matted with pine needles and mud. So pale she looked dead. Should have been dead, given the amount of blood pooled around her. But her chest moved. Barely. Cade crossed the clearing in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside her. His hands hovered over her body, not sure where to touch that wouldn't cause more damage. She was covered in cuts. No, not cuts. Carvings. "Fudge," Cade whispered. He'd seen battlefield injuries, seen what rival packs did to captured warriors during territory disputes, seen the aftermath of rogue attacks. This was different. This was deliberate. "Is she pack?" Reese asked, coming closer. "Laborer, by the uniform." Cade carefully turned her enough to see her face. Young. Maybe early 20s. He didn't recognize her, but that meant nothing. There were over 300 laborers in the compound. "Someone get water. And a cloak. We need to stop the bleeding." One of the other warriors, Marcus, young and still uncomfortable with gore, handed over his cloak but kept his distance. "Lieutenant, should we... is it worth..." "Finish that sentence and I'll have you mucking stables for a month," Cade said flatly. Marcus shut up. Cade pressed the cloak to the worst of the wounds, a deep gash across her shoulder blades that was still seeping. She didn't even flinch, too far gone to feel it. "Reese, look at this." Reese crouched beside him, and Cade carefully pulled back the cloak to expose her shoulder. 4 parallel lines, precise, deliberate, forming a symbol. Reese went very, very still. "That's not possible." "What is it?" Marcus asked. "The broken crown." Reese's voice was tight. "The symbol of the exiled bloodline." The other warriors exchanged glances. Everyone knew the history. It was taught to every warrior in basic training. 30 years ago, the Broken Crown Pack had controlled the eastern forests. They'd grown violent, unstable, started raiding human settlements. Alpha King Thaddeus Thorn, Valerian's father, had declared them rogue and led the northern packs in a purge that ended with the Broken Crown's alpha dead and their survivors scattered. The few who escaped had sworn vengeance. But that was 30 years ago. "They're extinct," Marcus said. "Aren't they?" "Apparently not." Cade traced the air above the carved symbol, careful not to touch the raw wound. "This isn't a random attack. This is a declaration." "On a laborer?" Marcus sounded incredulous. "Why not hit a warrior? A beta? Someone who actually matters?" Cade's jaw tightened. "Everyone matters. You know what I mean? She matters because they chose her." Reese leaned closer, inhaling carefully near the girl's throat, then went rigid. "Cade, smell her." Cade did. Underneath the blood and fear sweat and pine sap, there was something else. Something familiar. Pack scent. Not just any pack scent. His scent. "She works in the castle," Cade said slowly. "Close quarters, probably carries ambient scent from..." "That's not ambient." Reese met his eyes. "That's concentrated. She's been in direct contact with the Alpha King's belongings, repeatedly." The pieces clicked into place. "They didn't attack her because she's nobody," Cade said. "They attacked her because she carries his scent, because hurting her sends a message to him." "A declaration of war," Reese finished. Marcus looked between them. "So, what do we do?" Cade was already standing, already pulling the emergency flare from his belt. "Marcus, shift and run back to the compound. Find Captain Theron. Tell him we found a laborer attacked by Broken Crown rogues, and we need the palace healer dispatched immediately. The palace healer? Shouldn't we just take her to the laborer's clinic? She's a message, Marcus, a political target. That makes this the Alpha King's jurisdiction. Cade lit the flare, bright red smoke billowing into the dawn sky. And someone needs to inform him directly. You want me to tell the Alpha King that someone carved a declaration of war into a laborer? No. Cade's expression was grim. I want you to tell Captain Theron. He can tell the king. Now move. Marcus shifted and ran. Reese was carefully wrapping the girl in the cloak, applying pressure to the worst wounds. She's not going to make it to the compound. She's losing too much blood. Then we carry her fast. Cade scooped her up as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing. Her head lolled against his chest. Stay with me, he muttered. Just stay alive long enough for this to matter. Valerian was in the training yard when Captain Theron found him. The Alpha King had been awake since 4. He rarely slept more than 4 hours, and had spent the dawn working through sword drills with a focus that bordered on meditative. The repetitive motion, the precise control, the burn in his muscles. It was the only thing that quieted his wolf anymore. Theron's approach shattered the quiet. My king. The captain's voice was carefully neutral, but Valerian had known him for 15 years. He could hear the tension underneath. Valerian lowered his blade. Report. Border Patrol found a laborer in the forest shortcut. Female, early 20s. She'd been attacked. Valerian's wolf stirred with mild interest. Attacks near the compound were rare but not unheard of. Rogues? Yes, my king, but not random. Theron hesitated. They carved the Broken Crown symbol into her skin. The practice sword hit the ground. Valerian was moving before he consciously decided to move, crossing the training yard toward Theron with a speed that made the captain step back instinctively. Broken Crown? Valerian's voice was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made smart wolves nervous. You're certain? Lieutenant Brennan identified it personally. He's bringing her to the palace now. Her condition? Critical. She's lost significant blood. The palace healer is being prepared. Valerian's hands clenched. The Broken Crown pack. His father's war. A conflict Valerian had inherited and believed finished. The survivors scattered, their bloodline broken, their threat neutralized. Apparently not. Why a laborer? Valerian asked. If they wanted to send a message, why not target a warrior? Theron's expression shifted. According to Lieutenant Brennan, she carries your scent, my king. Concentrated exposure. She likely works in close contact with your personal effects. Everything stopped. The world narrowed to a single point of perfect, terrible clarity. Close contact with his personal effects. His chambers. His clothing. The laundry. What does she look like? Valerian heard himself ask. I haven't seen her personally, my king. Brennan said young, dark hair, laborer's uniform. Valerian was already walking. No, not walking. Moving with the lethal purpose of a predator who'd just identified prey. My king? Theron hurried after him. Where? My chambers. Now. The healer is setting up in the medical wing. I said my chambers. Valerian's voice dropped to a growl. And send word to Brennan. The girl comes directly to me. Not the medical wing. Not the laborer's clinic. To me. Yes, my king. Theron knew better than to ask why. Valerian took the stairs 3 at a time, his wolf clawing at his control. It couldn't be her. The odds were astronomical. There were dozens of laundry workers, and he'd been so careful to keep his distance, to not show favor, to protect her by ignoring her. But he knew. The way he'd known 3 years ago when she'd walked through his gates, and his wolf had screamed, "Mine!" so loud he'd had to lock himself in his study for 6 hours. The way he'd known every time he walked past the laundry and caught her faint scent and had to physically stop himself from going to her. The way he'd known that keeping her safe meant staying away. He'd been wrong. Valerian reached his chambers and threw the doors open hard enough to crack the frame. "Ready the healer's supplies," he barked at the attendants who appeared immediately. "I want blood replenishment drafts, wound closure supplies, pain management, everything. And I want this room cleared of everyone except essential medical personnel." "Yes, Alpha King." They scattered. Valerian stood in the center of his chambers, his private sanctuary that no laborer should ever enter, and forced himself to breathe. If they'd hurt her, if they'd carved their declaration into her skin, if she died because he'd been too much of a coward to claim her properly. The door opened. Lieutenant Brennan entered carefully, a blood-soaked bundle in his arms. "My king, the girl." "Put her on the bed." Brennan's eyes widened. Your bed, my king?" "Now, Lieutenant." Brennan obeyed. He laid her down on Valerian's silk sheets, the same sheets she'd washed 100 times, and stepped back quickly. Valerian crossed the room, looked down, and the fragile control he'd maintained for 3 years shattered completely. It was her. Sera. Her face was gray with blood loss, her breathing shallow. The cloak wrapped around her was soaked through, and carved into every visible inch of her skin was the symbol he'd spent his entire life trying to erase. "Out," Valerian said softly. "My king, the healer, out." Brennan fled. Valerian knelt beside the bed, his hands shaking, actually shaking, as he carefully pulled back the cloak to see the full extent of the damage. They'd destroyed her, carved her like a canvas, used her body to send him a message. And the worst wound, the deepest one, carved into her collarbone, spelled out 2 words in the old language: "We return." Valerian's wolf roared, his canines lengthened, his eyes shifted, power rolled off him in waves that made the windows rattle. "Lieutenant!" he bellowed. Brennan reappeared instantly, pale. "Yes, Alpha King?" Valerian didn't look away from Sera's broken body. "Assemble the Blood Guard," he said quietly. "Full war formation." "My king!" "Some rogue males bearing the broken crown mark crossed my border last night. They touched what is mine." His voice dropped to something that wasn't quite human. "I want them found before Moonrise. I want them brought to the northern execution grounds. Alive." Brennan swallowed hard. "Yes, Alpha King." "And Lieutenant, send word to every rogue pack within 3 territories. Tell them I'm about to remind them why their bloodline was broken in the first place." "It will be done." The door closed. Valerian carefully, so carefully, touched Sera's face. "Stay," he whispered. "Just stay alive. And I swear on my father's grave, I'll make them pay for every mark they put on you." Consciousness returned slowly, in fragments. First, warmth. Real warmth, not the thin, scratchy blankets of the laborers' dormitory, but deep, enveloping heat that soaked into bones that had been cold for 3 years. Second, softness. Sera's raw hands rested on fabric so smooth it felt like water against her damaged skin. Third, scent. Winter storms. Old forests. Something darker underneath. Leather and steel and a dominance so concentrated it should have been terrifying. She knew that scent. Every laborer in the compound knew that scent. Sera's eyes opened. The ceiling above her was coffered wood, intricate carvings of wolves and pine trees worked into panels that glowed amber in firelight. Not the water-stained plaster of the dormitory, not the clinical white of the medical wing. She turned her head, slowly, because everything hurt, and took in the room. Massive 4-poster bed, dark wood furniture that looked centuries old, floor-to-ceiling windows draped in heavy fabric, a fireplace large enough to stand in, flames crackling behind an ornate screen, bookshelves covering an entire wall, a desk scattered with papers and maps, and on the nightstand beside her, a crystal glass of water, a bowl of something that smelled like healing herbs, and a folded cloth that carried the same scent as the sheets. His scent. No. Panic spiked through her chest. This was impossible. Laborers didn't enter private chambers, didn't touch personal belongings outside of cleaning rotations, definitely didn't wake up in the Alpha King's bedroom. She was in the Alpha King's bedroom. Sera tried to sit up. Pain exploded across her shoulders and ribs, sharp enough to steal her breath and force her back down. The movement made something pull at her collarbone, and she gasped. "Don't move!" The voice came from the shadows near the fireplace. Sera's head turned so fast her vision blurred. A figure stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, utterly still, backlit by the fire so she couldn't see his face clearly, but she didn't need to. She'd know that silhouette anywhere. Alpha King Valerian stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing the formal leathers he wore for court, or the ceremonial armor he wore for pack gatherings. Just simple, dark clothing, a shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing forearms corded with muscle and marked with old scars. His black hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. His winter-gray eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her wolf, moved. For the first time in 3 years, Sera's dormant wolf stirred. Not just the weak flutter of instinct she'd felt in the forest, but actual awareness. A consciousness that pushed against her exhaustion and pain with something that felt like recognition. "You're awake," Valerian said quietly. He moved closer, not quickly, not threateningly, but with the careful control of someone approaching something fragile. "How do you feel?" How did she feel? Terrified, confused, in pain, completely out of her depth. Her voice came out as a rasp. She tried again. Why am I in my chambers?" He said it simply, like it was normal, like laborers woke up in the Alpha King's bed every day. "The palace healer treated you here. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. 6 hours? The morning shift. She'd missed the morning shift. "The silk," Sera managed. "I lost the silk. I have to pay for—" "I don't care about the silk." The words were quiet, but absolute. Final in a way that stopped her spiraling thoughts cold. Valerian reached the side of the bed and lowered himself into the chair that had been pulled close enough that she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tightness at the corners of his mouth. He looked exhausted. When was the last time he'd slept? "The patrol found you in the forest," he said. "You'd lost enough blood that you should have died. The healer said another 15 minutes and—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. "You're alive because Lieutenant Brennan moved fast." Sera's mind was struggling to process. The Alpha King was explaining this to her personally, sitting beside her, looking at her like she mattered. "I should go," she whispered. "I shouldn't be here. This is— Protocol says laborers aren't allowed in private—" "Sera!" Her name in his voice stopped her completely. He'd said her name. The Alpha King had said her name. "You're not leaving," Valerian continued in that same quiet tone. "Not until you tell me what happened." She should tell him, should report the attack, but the words stuck in her throat because telling him meant acknowledging that she'd been stupid enough to take the forest path, careless enough to get caught, weak enough to— "I fell," she said. The lie tasted like ash. "I was hurrying and I fell. The path was dark and—" "Don't." One word, gentle but unyielding. Valerian leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I've seen battlefield injuries. I know what claws look like. I know what deliberate carving looks like." His eyes held hers. "And I know you didn't fall." Sera's throat closed. She looked away, focusing on the carved ceiling, because meeting his gaze felt too dangerous, too exposing. "They were rogues," she finally whispered. "4 of them. They said I carried your scent. That I'd been touching your things. They wanted to send you a message." Silence. When she risked a glance back at Valerian, his expression had gone completely still. Not blank, the opposite of blank. Like he was holding back something massive by sheer force of will. "May I see?" he asked softly. "See what?" "Your wounds. The healer gave me a report, but I want to see them myself." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. Laborers didn't show weakness, didn't draw attention, didn't make themselves vulnerable to ranked wolves who could... But this wasn't a ranked wolf looking at prey. This was something else entirely. Sera nodded, barely. Valerian stood slowly, moved to the side of the bed. "I'm going to pull back the sheet. Tell me if anything hurts." He drew down the covering with such careful precision that Sera barely felt the fabric move. She was wearing a clean shift, soft linen, probably from the palace stores. Someone had changed her, cleaned her, tended her while she was unconscious. The bandages covered most of her torso, her shoulders, her arms, professional wrapping, expensive healing salve that made her skin tingle with magic. Valerian studied the visible marks, the ones on her collarbone, the edge of the carving on her shoulder that showed above the bandage line. His hand moved toward her skin, then stopped. "May I?" he asked. Sera's heart hammered. She nodded again. His fingers touched the edge of the bandage on her collarbone, barely a brush of contact, and even that gentle pressure made her wolf surge with awareness. Not pain, not fear. Want. Her dormant wolf wanted his touch. Valerian carefully peeled back the bandage enough to expose the carved words. "We return." She watched his face as he read them, watched his expression shift from controlled calm to something cold and lethal that made the air in the room feel heavy. "Old language," he murmured. "They carved a declaration into your skin." "I don't understand," Sera admitted. "What does it mean?" "It means they've been planning this for years." He replaced the bandage with that same meticulous care. "It means they used you to deliver a message they knew I couldn't ignore." "I'm sorry." His eyes snapped to hers. "What?" "I shouldn't have taken the forest path. I knew it was dangerous. I was stupid and careless and—" "Sera." He said her name like a command. "Listen to me very carefully. What happened to you was not your fault. You were targeted, deliberately, by enemies who wanted to hurt me and chose you as their weapon." "But I'm nobody," she whispered. "Why would they—" "You are not nobody." The words came out harder than before, almost angry. Valerian pulled back slightly, visibly forcing his control back into place. "You are not invisible. You never were." Sera stared at him, confused. "You don't know me." Something painful crossed his face. "I know you work 14-hour shifts. I know you send most of your wages to your brother in a sanctuary pack. I know you volunteered for the overnight runs that no one else wanted because you couldn't afford to seem uncooperative." He paused. "I know that 6 months ago you dropped a basket of linens in the East Corridor because you were exhausted, and I helped you pick them up." The memory hit her like a physical blow. She'd been so tired that day, dizzy. She'd stumbled and the basket had exploded across the floor, and she'd wanted to cry from sheer frustration because she didn't have time to rewash everything. And then he'd been there. The Alpha King, crouching in the corridor, gathering scattered sheets without a word while she'd stammered apologies. She'd been so panicked she'd barely looked at him, barely registered anything except the terror of having the most powerful wolf in the territory witness her failure. But she remembered his hands, scarred knuckles carefully folding fabric, and when he'd handed her the basket, he'd said, "Be careful, Sera. You work too hard." He'd known her name then. "I thought I imagined that," she whispered. "You didn't." "But why? How?" "I notice everything in my compound." His voice gentled. "Especially the wolves who deserve better than what they're getting." Her wolf was fully awake now, restless and confused and pushing at Sera with feelings she couldn't name. She'd spent 3 years learning not to feel, not to want, not to hope. And now the Alpha King was sitting beside her bed, looking at her like she was something precious, and her carefully built walls were crumbling. "I don't understand," Sera said helplessly. Valerian studied her for a long moment. Then he did something completely unexpected. He smiled. It was small, barely a curve of his mouth, but genuine, and it transformed his face from terrifying to something that made her chest ache. "I've been watching you for 3 years," he said quietly, "making sure the head housekeeper didn't overwork you beyond reason, making sure the ranked wolves left you alone, making sure you were safe." His expression shifted. "I failed at that last part." "That's not your fault?" "It is absolutely my fault," Steele returned to his voice. "You were attacked because they recognized my scent on you. Because they knew hurting you would hurt me. And they were right." The room felt too small suddenly, too warm. Sera's wolf was doing something strange, pushing at her consciousness with an insistence that felt like recognition, like bond. No, that was impossible. "Why?" Sera asked, the word barely a breath. "Why would you watch me? I'm just a laborer. You're the Alpha King." Valerian leaned forward again, and this time when his hand moved, he let his fingers brush her cheek, the lightest touch. "Because 3 years ago," he said softly, "you walked through my gates and my wolf recognized you, and I've been fighting the instinct to claim you ever since." The world stopped. "What?" "You were in debt, under contract, serving in my compound because you had no choice." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I wasn't going to use that power against you. I wasn't going to force a bond when you couldn't freely choose." Mate. He was saying they were mates. "But I'm..." Sera couldn't find words. "I know what you are," Valerian said gently, "and I know what I am, and I know the entire pack will lose their minds when I announce that the Alpha King's mate is a laundry Omega who came here on a debt contract." His smile turned sharp. "I don't care." Sera's wolf was singing now, actually singing. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll stay," Valerian said. "Say you'll let me keep you safe while you heal. And then," he paused, "then you can decide what you want. No pressure, no obligation." For the first time in 3 years, Sera felt something crack open in her chest. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, beautiful hope. "I'll stay," she breathed. Valerian's eyes closed briefly, like she'd given him something invaluable. "Good," he said, "because I have rogues to hunt, and I want you here when I get back." Sera woke to moonlight and the certain knowledge that she was alone. Not abandoned, she could still smell him everywhere, in the sheets, in the air, in the very stones of the room, but alone. The chair beside the bed was empty. The fire had burned lower, and through the massive windows she could see the moon hanging fat and silver over the forest. How long had she been asleep? Her body ached, but differently than before. The sharp agony had dulled to a persistent throb. When she carefully touched the bandage on her collarbone, the healing salve had already worked its expensive magic. She could feel new skin forming beneath the wrapping. She should rest, should lie back down and let the healing continue. Instead, Sera sat up. The room spun briefly, then settled. Her wolf stirred, not the weak flutter from before, but actual presence, awareness. It pushed at her consciousness with feelings that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with the scent saturating this space. "Mate," her wolf whispered. "Find mate." "He's hunting," Sera said aloud, testing her voice, stronger now. "He's making them pay for what they did to us." Her wolf hummed approval, satisfaction, then, "Explore. Know him. This is ours now." The possessiveness should have shocked her. 3 years of trained invisibility, of taking up no space, of wanting nothing. And now her wolf wanted to claim an alpha king's bedroom as territory? But her wolf was right. If they were truly mates, if he'd been watching her for 3 years, waiting for her contract to end, then this room wasn't forbidden anymore. This space was hers? The thought made her dizzy. Sera stood carefully, testing her balance. Her legs held. The healing magic was working faster than any treatment she'd ever received in the laborer's clinic. Then again, she'd never received palace healer treatment before. She moved to the windows first, drawn by moonlight. The view looked north over the compound walls into the forest. From this height, the king's tower, she realized, she could see the patrol routes marked by torchlight, movement in the darkness. The hunt was still active. He was out there somewhere, hunting for her. For us, her wolf corrected. Sera turned from the window and let herself actually look at the room. Not with a laborer's eye, cataloging what needed cleaning, what needed folding, but as someone who might belong here. The bookshelves drew her next. Hundreds of volumes, leather-bound, organized by subject. Military strategy, pack law, northern history, poetry? She touched the spine of a slim volume, Human Poet, pre-integration era, and found a silk bookmark halfway through. He read poetry. The Alpha King read poetry. On the desk, maps marked with patrol routes, supply lines, territory boundaries. A half-finished letter in bold handwriting, reports stacked neatly, and tucked beneath a leather journal, a sketch. Sera's hand trembled as she pulled it free. Charcoal on thick paper, a drawing of the East Corridor, the one with the arched windows where morning light came through in geometric patterns, and in the center of that light, a figure. Small, head bent, carrying something. Her. He'd drawn her. The detail was stunning. The way her hair fell forward, the exhaustion in her posture, even the specific basket she carried on Tuesdays, the one with the broken handle she'd tied back together with spare cord. In the bottom corner, dated 8 months ago. Oh, Sera breathed. Her wolf was fully awake now, pacing inside her consciousness with growing strength. The bond, unacknowledged for 3 years, was flooding her system with energy she'd forgotten she could feel. Her senses sharpened. She could hear conversations 3 floors down, could smell the specific type of wood burning in fireplaces throughout the castle, could feel power. The room suddenly flooded with it. Not her power, his. The air pressure changed. The fire roared higher without anyone touching it. The windows rattled in their frames, and Sera's wolf threw back her head and howled, silent but ecstatic, because she recognized what was coming. The door opened. Valerian stood in the doorway, and he was nothing like the careful, controlled king who'd sat beside her bed earlier. This was the Winter King. His eyes were pure wolf, no human gray left, just burning gold. His dominance rolled off him in waves that should have driven her to her knees. Blood spattered his shirt, his hands. He was breathing hard, like he'd run the entire way back, and he was staring at her, standing in the middle of his room, wearing his borrowed shift, holding his sketch, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "You're awake," he said roughly. "You should be resting." "I slept." Sera carefully set the sketch down. "Did you find them?" "Yes." One word. Absolute. "Are they alive, for now, waiting in the northern grounds?" He stepped into the room, and the door swung shut behind him without anyone touching it. "I came back because I felt—" He stopped, his eyes locked on her face. "Your wolf. She's awake." "Yes." "Fully?" Sera nodded. She could feel it. 3 years of dormancy burning away in minutes. The bond was feeding her wolf, strengthening her, waking parts of herself she'd thought permanently broken. Valerian crossed the room in 3 strides, stopped an arm's length away, like he didn't trust himself to get closer. "Show me your shoulder," he said quietly. "You already saw—" "Show me." The command vibrated through her bones, not cruel, desperate. Sera carefully pulled aside the collar of the shift, exposing the bandaged shoulder. Valerian reached out, his hands still bloody from the hunt, and with impossible gentleness peeled back the wrapping. The broken crown symbol was still there, healing, but visible. 4 curved lines forming a shattered circle. His whole body went rigid. "They carved their mark into your skin," he said, his voice dropping to something not quite human. "Do you know what that means?" "You said it was a declaration." "It means they knew." His hand hovered over the mark, not quite touching. In the old wars, enemies marked stolen mates to claim them, to say, "What was yours is ours now." They marked you because they could smell the bond, because they knew hurting you would destroy me. The room's temperature dropped. Frost formed on the windows. "They hurt you," Valerian continued, and each word carried more weight, more power. "To hurt me. Because they knew—" His voice cracked. "Because they knew you were mine." Sera's breath caught. "You said that before, but I didn't understand. Who did this to you?" The question came out as a growl, primal and devastating, not asking for information, asking permission to unleash whatever he'd been holding back, and Sera's wolf answered. She surged forward in Sera's consciousness with a force that stole her breath. For 3 years she'd been silent, and now she was roaring, claiming, demanding, recognizing. "Mate!" her wolf screamed. "Ours protect, avenge!" "Sera?" Valerian's hands caught her shoulders as she swayed. "What's happening?" "My wolf," she gasped. She's so strong. I haven't felt her like this since before you came here. Since before you started starving her." His hands gentled on her shoulders. "The bond is feeding her, making her whole again." Sera looked up at him, really looked, past the blood and the wolf eyes and the terrifying dominance. Looked at the face she'd been secretly memorizing for 3 years. The face she'd told herself was forbidden. "I felt it," she whispered. "That day in the corridor, when you helped me with the laundry. I felt the bond try to snap into place, and I thought I was losing my mind because why would—" "Because you're mine," Valerian said simply. "You've been mine since the moment you walked through my gates, and I've been yours. And I've spent 3 years protecting you by pretending I didn't know." Tears burned in Sera's eyes. "They used me to hurt you. They failed." His thumb traced her cheek, careful of her injuries. "You're alive. You're here, and they're about to learn what happens when someone touches an Alpha King's mate." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, her wolf preened. "I want to see," Sera said suddenly. Valerian went still. "See what?" "What you do to them. What happens when—" She stopped, started again. "For 3 years I've been invisible, powerless, something that happened to, instead of someone who chose. I want to watch you make them regret it." A slow, dangerous smile curved his mouth. "My fierce little mate," he murmured. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Then I'll carry you. You're not strong enough to walk that far yet." "I can—" He swept her into his arms before she could finish. Careful of her wounds, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. "Let me do this," he said quietly. "Let me carry you. Let me show the entire pack that the invisible Omega is mine, that anyone who hurts you answers to me." Sera's arms came around his neck. "Okay," she whispered, and felt the mate bond lock into place like a key turning. The northern clearing was ancient, a stone circle carved by the first Alpha Packs, where challenges were witnessed and justice delivered under the moon's eye. Sera had never seen it before. Laborers weren't brought to execution grounds, but she wasn't a laborer anymore. Valerian carried her down corridors that grew progressively colder, through doors that opened at his approach without touch, past guards who dropped immediately to one knee. Their eyes widened when they saw her in his arms. Shock, confusion, rapid calculation. She met their gazes. Let them look. Let them see. The invisible Omega was visible now. They emerged into night air sharp with pine and frost. The clearing opened before them, a perfect circle of standing stones, each one taller than 3 men. Torches burned in iron brackets, casting everything in flickering orange and shadow, and in the center, forced to their knees, were 4 rogues. Sera's wolf snarled in recognition. Even battered and bound, she knew them. The largest one, the one who'd carved her skin, lifted his head as they approached. His eyes widened. "Impossible," he breathed. "She should be dead." "She's considerably harder to kill than you anticipated," Valerian said mildly. He carried Sera to a raised stone seat, the witness throne, and settled her carefully. "Stay here. Watch. This is yours to witness." He started to pull away. Sera caught his hand. "Make them understand," she said quietly. "Make them regret every mark." His smile was all teeth. "Oh, little mate, they already do." Valerian turned to face the clearing, and the shift in him was immediate. The careful king who'd carried her vanished. In his place stood something older, more primal, the Alpha King in his full power. "Marcus!" he called. A wolf stepped from the shadows, massive, silver-furred, radiating beta dominance. He shifted mid-stride, bones reforming, until a tall man with sharp features and calculating eyes stood before them. He wore the black leather of the blood guard, twin blades crossed on his back. "My king." Marcus dropped to one knee. His eyes flicked briefly to Sera, and she saw the shock there, the rapid reassessment. "The hunting party is assembled, 12 blood guard, 4 trackers. We await your command." "You've already succeeded," Valerian said. "The rogues are here. The hunt is done. What remains is justice." He gestured to the kneeling prisoners. "Do you know what they did, Marcus?" "They crossed our border, my king. Attacked one of our—" Marcus stopped, corrected carefully. "Attacked your mate." The words echoed across the clearing. Your mate. Sera watched the other guards shift, exchange glances, watched the information ripple through them like electricity. The Alpha King had a mate. The Alpha King's mate had been attacked. The Alpha King was about to make an example that would echo through every rogue pack in the territories. "They didn't just attack her," Valerian said, his voice carrying to every witness. "They marked her, carved the broken crown symbol into her skin, used her body as a message because they thought I wouldn't retaliate for someone they believed was beneath my notice." He moved toward the prisoners with the lethal grace of a predator closing distance. They thought wrong. The largest rogue tried to speak. "We were sending a message to the thief king who stole our lands." Valerian's hand shot out, caught the rogue's throat, lifted him off his knees entirely. The rogue choked, clawing at the iron grip. "You carved words into her skin," Valerian said softly. "Let me return the favor." He threw the rogue backward. The man hit stone hard enough to crack it. "Marcus, my blade." The second drew one of his own weapons, a long knife, silver-edged, marked with runes, and offered it hilt first. Valerian took it, tested the weight. "In the old laws," he said conversationally, addressing the assembled guards but watching the rogues. "There was a punishment for those who marked another's mate. The claiming scar. The attacker received the same wounds they inflicted, carved in the same pattern, so they would carry the memory until death." He crouched before the largest rogue. "I'm going to give you a choice. Tell me who sent you. Who leads the Broken Crown survivors, where they're hiding, how many remain, and I'll make your death quick." The rogue spat blood. "The dead don't forget, Winter King, and we don't betray our Alpha." "Then you'll die slowly," Valerian placed the blade against the rogue's shoulder. And screaming. What followed was methodical, brutal. Each cut precise, matching the marks they'd carved into Sera, delivered with the same deliberate care. The rogue tried not to scream, failed. Sera watched without flinching. Her wolf was singing, dark, vicious satisfaction. This was justice. This was protection. This was what happened when someone hurt what belonged to the Alpha King. When Valerian finished with the first rogue, he moved to the second, then the third. By the fourth, the youngest rogue was weeping. "Please, we were following orders. We didn't know we thought she was just a servant." "She was never just anything," Valerian said quietly. "And now every rogue pack in existence will know what happens when you touch what's mine." He stood, handed the blade back to Marcus. Blood covered his hands, his forearms, spattered across his shirt. "Let them live," he said. "Heal them enough that they'll survive the journey back to whatever hole the broken crown crawls from. And make sure they carry this message. The next wolf who crosses my border looking for vengeance won't receive mercy, won't receive trial, won't receive breath." Marcus bowed. "It will be done, my king." "And Marcus?" Valerian's voice dropped. "Send word to every pack within 3 territories. Tell them the Alpha King has claimed his mate. Tell them she is under my protection. Tell them anyone who harms her, anyone who threatens her, touches her, or looks at her wrong, answers to me personally." "Yes, my king." Valerian turned back to Sera, crossed the clearing, knelt before the witness throne so they were eye level. "Is it enough?" he asked quietly. "Do you feel avenged?" Sera looked past him at the broken rogues, then back to his blood-covered face. "I feel safe," she said. Something in his expression cracked open. "You are. I swear it. On my bloodline, on my crown, on everything I am. You're safe now." He stood, lifted her carefully. "Let's go home." "Wait." Sera touched his cheek, left a smudge of his own blood there. "They need to see." "See what?" "That I choose you too. That this isn't just you claiming me. That I'm choosing the Winter King who avenged me." Valerian's eyes blazed gold. "Sera!" She leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief, chaste, witnessed by every guard in the clearing, and absolutely deliberate. When she pulled back, Valerian was staring at her like she'd given him the world. "My fierce mate," he murmured. "You're going to be a terrifying queen." "Good," Sera said. "I've been invisible long enough." The walk back to the castle took longer because Valerian refused to move quickly, refused to jostle her injuries, but Sera didn't mind. She could feel eyes watching from windows, from corridors, from shadows. The word was already spreading. By morning, every wolf in the compound would know. The invisible laundry Omega was the Alpha King's mate, and the world had shifted to make room for her. The howls began at midnight. Sera heard them from Valerian's chambers, now their chambers, though the thought still felt too big to hold. She'd been dozing in the massive bed, her body still healing, her wolf still adjusting to the sudden flood of bond strength after 3 years of starvation. But the howls woke her completely. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds. The entire Blood Guard and every warrior pack in the Northern Territories, all singing the same message into the night. The king hunts, the king protects, the king avenges. And underneath that chorus, one voice rose above the rest, deeper, older, carrying a dominance that made the windows rattle. Valerian. Sera pulled herself to the window, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The moon hung full and bloated over the forest, painting everything silver. She could see torches moving through the trees, could hear the crash of bodies through undergrowth, could smell blood on the wind, not hers this time. Theirs. Her wolf paced restlessly, wanting to join the hunt, but knowing their body wasn't ready. So instead, she pressed close to the glass and listened. The hunt moved like a living thing, coordinated, relentless. She heard Marcus's voice calling coordinates, heard the blood guard's tactical chatter, heard the rogues' growing panic as they realized they weren't being chased, they were being herded, driven toward the northern clearing like prey into a killing ground. And at the center of it all, Valerian's dominance rolled across the territory in waves that made even Sera, safe in the castle, claimed and protected, want to bare her throat in submission. This was the Winter King, not the careful male who'd sat beside her bed and confessed 3 years of silent watching, not the gentle hands that had treated her wounds. This was the Alpha who'd united the northern packs through sheer overwhelming force, the wolf who'd killed a rival Alpha in single combat before his 23rd birthday, the predator who'd been holding himself back for her sake. He wasn't holding back anymore. Sera watched the torches converge on the clearing, heard the sudden spike of violence, snarling, screaming, the wet sounds of claws meeting flesh. It lasted less than 5 minutes. Then, silence. The kind of silence that meant the hunt was over. The kind of silence that meant justice had teeth. Dawn came soft and pink, completely at odds with the night's violence. Sera had tried to stay awake, but exhaustion and healing magic had pulled her under sometime before the moon set. She dreamed of running, not fleeing, but hunting, her wolf strong and whole, racing beside a massive black wolf whose eyes burned gold. She woke to the scent of winter storms and blood. Valerian stood at the window where she'd been hours before, silhouetted against the rising sun. He'd cleaned up, mostly, changed clothes, but his hair was still damp from washing, and she could see traces of blood under his fingernails where he'd missed spots. "You're back," Sera said softly. He turned immediately. Crossed the room, dropped to his knees beside the bed with a grace that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size. "I'm back," he confirmed. His hand found hers, careful of the healing cuts on her palm. "Did the noise wake you?" "The howling did. I listened to the hunt." She studied his face, exhausted but satisfied. "Did you find them all?" "Every one. The 4 who hurt you are in the clearing exactly as I promised, alive, marked, and very aware of their mistake." His thumb traced circles on her wrist. "The message has been sent. By morning, every rogue pack within 5 territories will know what happens when someone touches my mate. And by afternoon, every pack everywhere will know the Alpha King claimed a laundry Omega," Sera said quietly. Valerian's expression shifted. "Does that frighten you?" "Terrifies me," she admitted. "I've spent 3 years being invisible, being nothing, and now I'm supposed to be, what, a queen? I don't know how to be visible, Valerian. I don't know how to be seen." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Can I tell you a secret?" "Yes." "I don't know how to be seen either." He settled back on his heels. "Everyone sees the Winter King, the Alpha who rules through dominance, the warrior who killed his way to power, but no one sees me. The male who reads poetry at midnight because it's the only thing that quiets his wolf, who draws in charcoal because it's the only way he knows to capture beautiful things, who spent 3 years watching a woman fade in his own compound and felt helpless to stop it without stealing her choice." Sera's breath caught. "You felt invisible too." "I felt alone." His voice roughened. "Surrounded by thousands of wolves and completely, utterly alone. Until you walked through my gates and my wolf said, 'her,' and suddenly I understood what I'd been missing. Not just a mate, but someone who understood what it meant to be unseen." "I see you," Sera whispered. "I know. I felt it that day in the corridor when you looked at me, really looked, and for half a second you forgot to be afraid. You just saw me, and I wanted that look for the rest of my immortal life." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I spent 3 years protecting you from the shadows," he continued. making sure you were safe without ever letting you know I was watching. Because I thought that's what love looked like, sacrifice without acknowledgement, protection without claim. I was wrong. What does love look like? Sera asked. This. He gestured between them. Choosing each other. Both of us visible. Both of us seen. No more hiding in corridors. No more pretending we don't feel the bond pulling us together. His eyes met hers. Human gray now, not wolf gold, but burning with equal intensity. Say you accept it. Say you'll be my mate. Not because I command it, not because the bond demands it, because you choose it. Sera's wolf was howling, joyous, triumphant, finally free. I choose it, she said. I choose you. The Winter King and the poet, the alpha and the male who helped me pick up laundry, all of it, all of you. Sera, I choose you, she repeated stronger. And I choose visibility, and I choose to stop being afraid of wanting things, of wanting you. Valerian surged forward, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted like dawn and promise, and 3 years of restrained longing finally unleashed. Sera's hands came up to frame his face, still careful of her injuries but determined, claiming him as thoroughly as he was claiming her. The mate bond. Sang. She felt it lock into place completely, not just acknowledged, but accepted. The mark on her wrist, the one that had been forming since she woke, suddenly burned with golden light. Valerian pulled back, staring at the glowing wolf symbol that now wrapped her wrist like a bracelet. It's beautiful, he breathed. It's ours, Sera corrected. He laughed, a real laugh, surprised and delighted, and kissed her again. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, the news had spread through the compound like wildfire. The laundry Omega named Sera, the one no one remembered, the invisible girl who washed sheets, was the Alpha King's mate. The blood guard confirmed it. The palace healer whispered it to the head housekeeper. The warriors who'd witnessed the claiming kiss in the northern clearing told anyone who would listen. In the laborers' dormitory, Mira stared at Sera's empty bunk and tried to remember if she'd ever bothered learning the girl's name. In the castle kitchen, the head cook started preparing mate-claiming feast dishes. In the East Wing, visiting alphas received emergency summons for a formal announcement ceremony. And in the northern forests, 4 broken rogues limped back toward their hiding places, carrying marks carved into their skin and a message carved into their minds. Touch what belongs to the Winter King, and pray he kills you quickly. In their chambers, Valerian held Sera against his chest and watched dawn paint her face gold. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now I announce you properly. Formal ceremony. Every ranked wolf in the territories in attendance. You'll be presented as my chosen mate and future queen. He paused. It will be overwhelming, terrifying. Every eye in the kingdom on you. Good, Sera said. Let them look. Let them see. I'm done being invisible. His smile was fierce and proud. My queen. Your mate, she corrected. The rest I'll learn. Together, Valerian promised. We'll figure it out together. Outside, the castle bells began to ring, announcing news that would reshape the northern territories. By moonrise, every rogue had feared for his life. By sunrise, every Omega knew her Alpha King had chosen his queen, and in a bedroom high in the king's tower, 2 wolves who'd spent years being invisible finally learned what it meant to be seen. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments what you think about this story and where you're watching from. Your support means a lot and helps us keep creating more stories like this. Until next time, stay safe, stay inspired.